What's up, y'all? My name is Evan Strong. I am the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. This is In the Image Clothing Company podcast. Welcome. We have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ here, aka the truth of all things. I normally do some kind of intro, music-wise, and I don't know what we'll do for sure. Maybe I'll just feel out a tempo that's not actually outside of me and see if I can make some things come out of these. There's your intro, music-wise. I'm staring over at this thermometer, which is what I keep calling it, at least just about keep calling it that. It's a metronome, but I've had that in some of these, past episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, and I've just done a little something over the metronome is what it actually is. But anyway, welcome. I'll do a little bit of an intro as I do, talk about what the company is, talk about clothing for the amount of time that I do, and then we'll get into the discussion because this is actually episode 81 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, and it's titled, What's the Reason? And this is going to be really, really, really cool. So stick around for the discussion, but we'll do the intro as we do. Sometimes it's pretty lengthy. I've noticed that. Sometimes it'll be like 10, even maybe 15 minutes of an intro, but then we'll have like an hour and a half, 2-hour episode or whatever, right? So whatever it ends up being for that specific one, no kind of parameters that are set. It's just as it is, right? So here at the podcast for In the Image Clothing Company, we discuss universal truths. We discuss things as they are. I'm sinful by nature, just as he and she, meaning all the humans, are. But I talk about things here that'll be the same forever. At least most all of what we say here. That's how it is. I mean, that's the reason for this, is to discuss things, give context on things, some understanding about things that will never change. And the way that we do that is our whole company, In the Image Clothing Company, but especially In the Image Clothing Company podcast, we're centered around the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so it's the truth of all things, as I said, which means it's not something to believe in, because even at times when you don't want to believe it or you claim that it's not what it still is. Truth doesn't change. Our God himself is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Jesus, the Christ. He is who he says he is. And we don't get to perceive who he is and have that be who he is. And we don't get to try to change how he works, because he is who he is. And he decided that. So one other third of our company is In the Image Clothing Company, the main side of things. And over there, I discuss the anatomy of the human body. I've got a really deep understanding of it and how to just always keyword allow the human body to work. The body's just been given certain ranges of motion in every joint. We talk about the skeletal system because it's the thing that doesn't change. The muscle mass does, the fat content does at different times in our lives. But I focus on the skeletal system, and we're only ever going to be able to just let it do what it's going to do. No amount of workouts or stretching or exercise of any kind is going to aid your body to get it to function better. You can enhance maybe the amount of weight that you can pick up in only a certain amount of time, right? While you're doing workouts to gain strength, but once you stop doing them, your body just always comes back to its only normal that it will ever have. And it has had that since birth, other than just we've grown until we're a full-grown human being. So we discuss clothing because it's the only thing placed physically on us. And the body has to have a center because there's a spine there. And all the other things that I mentioned, the sternum, the trachea, the nose, the jaw has to stay centered. It stabilizes the entire body naturally. And gravity pulls us straight down on our earth. And when we place clothing on us, if there's imbalances weight-wise or size-wise, left to right, oversized clothing, stitching that's doing anything to the rotations of the body, or clothing that's just not sitting in the only locations where the body has its operations, the body's being altered. And that's what I mean when I say no amount of workouts or exercises or stretching will ever help your body, but the reason it feels like it doesn't work is because it's being altered, and most of us just aren't aware of it. I wasn't until I was 24. I started to really get, playing around with clothing and noticing that it was damaging my body. I bought my first pair of barefoot shoes, and it's just a style of shoe that allows your feet to be very close to as if there was nothing placed on them, and then they can just function how they were designed to. And then I messed around with shoelaces because I realized they were altering my feet. There's less material within the shoe, and so it had a greater effect on what it was doing to the shoe, being, the lacing. And so I messed around with things. I came up with the dreaded collar seam modification within t-shirts, a lot of prayer, a lot of trial and error. And so we talk about just how to let the body do its thing on the main side of In The Image Clothing Company. Standing, sitting, sleeping, eating, doing it all naturally, staying hydrated, how to really do that, and how, we discuss how drinking more fluid a lot of times really actually dehydrates the body. It just flushes its system out, and the things that are balanced within there are no longer in there once they get either an excessive amount or depleted by what we're trying to do is hydrate us, and we actually dehydrate ourselves by drinking plain water, for example. So, especially just in such an excessive amount that's happening nowadays. But there's a lot of reasons as to why. So, we get into all that plus a lot more. Free modifications, and we are a clothing company. It's in our name, and so we'll have clothing available, staying centered, fitting correct, allowing the body to work, made out of 100% natural materials when we do. Make sure you purchase it in your size. And then we've got another third of our company, which is In The Image Clothing Company Music. I did a little musical intro. I keep looking at this metronome over here, and I keep almost calling it a thermometer as well. But I'm very musical, always have been. It's just been, I was going to say it in just kind of like a casual way. It's just in me, but it's a gift that I've been given by my God. We've all been given gifts in the ways that we have, even if you feel like you're less gifted than somebody else. It's, we have our own individual gifts, and they look different slightly, or maybe quite different depending on who you are. And maybe looking at somebody else and like, I wish I had their gifts. No, you don't, because they're not for you. But I'm very musical, and so I play guitar finger style really well. I don't currently have a guitar, and that will come, but I address setups of guitars to just allow the hands, which are essentially the shoulders, to just be unaltered, right? The feet are essentially the hips, as I talk about within the human body. And yeah, so just how to let the body be unaltered while we play music, but then also I make music, and that's where I share that a lot of the time that I do, right? So there we are as a company. Now, let's talk about clothing because it has to be in a certain location. It doesn't matter if you're a man, if you're a woman, if you're tall, if you're short, if you're skinny, if you're fat, if you're on any part of the globe or any time period. The body just has to be unaltered, or else it's altered, and it's just not working in those cases, which is how most people are living their lives if you're not pretty darn intentional about what you're doing with the things you place onto your body. So the pants we wear, the waistline needs to be entirely above our hips, and the angle needs to be slightly higher in the front than in the rear, only very slightly, just so it's not pulling down at all. Slightly higher in the front than the rear to keep the body in its neutral position, keep those core muscles activated always, as they would always naturally be, because the body's only designed to be working, always designed to work. There's an episode of In The Image Clothing Company podcast titled that. I went into a lot of that. Now, the tops that we wear, the seams on top of our shoulders need to be evenly behind those little bones at the very peak of the top of the shoulders near the edges, because those are the other end of the collarbone. That's how we keep our rib cage open. That's how we keep our shoulders in their only neutral position. And that's just how we allow the body to work through those seams. And then ideally just the very edges of our shoulders is where those edge seams should be, because that's where the shoulder has its motion in that ball and socket joint up there. Now, In The Image Clothing Company has two things we call prerequisites that just are further eating in no restriction to the body, because these things are just kind of things that aren't always there. You're probably always just about wearing a top and a bottom as far as clothing goes, but maybe you don't always have shoelaces in whatever you place on your feet, and maybe you don't always have tags within whatever clothing you're wearing. And so our two prerequisites are, firstly, the lacing technique we use, because it's just weaving a rope across the top of the feet, and the feet are only shaped the way that they are. They only have the operations that they do. So what we call In The Image Clothing Company shoelace technique, where you can find us anywhere. It's the 17th of March, 2025. So internet, right? Find us, find our shoelacing technique. With that, we tie our shoes evenly over toward the inside on both feet to the center of the body. These are my Zero Denver leathers. I have them off right now. Right before I started filming this, I took my shoes off because I was doing a little bit of release to some of the scar tissue on my outer right ankle, right, as we talk about often, if you know. And if you don't know, check out the main site of In The Image Clothing Company. But I'll just show this. I have, these are the Denver Leather by Xero shoes, Xero. No affiliation as of today's date or up until, but I love them, and so I shout them out when I do. They're great. So, but that's how the technique looks for our shoelacing technique in the Image Clothing Companies. Now, secondly, we remove all tags from clothing. Anywhere a tag is within clothing, it's going to either alter the body's skeletal system's position, only workings, and or just not allow the musculature that's right against where that tag is to activate. So then other parts of the body are compensating. And the body can't work within compensations. But what happens is if there's anything within the body at all that isn't working correct, something else and many things have to do some sort of compensation, because anywhere any part of the body goes, the rest of it does as well. It only works as a whole. And so, as you can see with my tags, well, I won't show them, just, I don't know. Not that I'm hiding anything, but I don't know about legal stuff or whatever. I don't know. But with the shoe tags, sometimes I just take a knife or scissors and just put a lot of slits into them just to make them grippy, to keep those ankles active. Otherwise, they won't activate against that, and your whole body's suffering just because a tag in the tongue of your shoe or anywhere inside it. So we remove all tags. Now, let's get into this, because episode 81 of In The Image Clothing Company podcast, this one here, is titled, What's the Reason? For a reason. Because I'll start it out this way and then we'll get into whatever we do. But a big thing is we have a lot in this life, dude. I mean, no matter where you are on the earth, you might be in a place that doesn't have so many options of things, at least perceived that way, right? It might not seem like there's that much, and you go somewhere else and it's like, there's all this stuff. Holy cow, so much to choose from. But no matter where you are, there really is a lot that you either could or couldn't do. And a lot of times people are saying like, well, you should go involve yourself in this, or go do that, or your friends are doing this, or these people did that. And, you know, it doesn't matter what you do or don't do in life. It's just, what's the reason? Because we all have the amount of time we have here. And I think it's common for us to think we all have like somewhere between 80, well, somewhere probably right around 80 years. I think that's, average lifespan in around modern time, just for humans across the earth, In different places it might be less, in different places it might be more. But the reason I'm saying it is because of that reason. Some people don't live until they're even 20. Some people don't even live till they're 3 years old. Some people get born and they only make it a few hours, a few minutes. And then some people live like 100, 110 years maybe, right? There's some people live maybe 120 years even. Like, we sometimes get this idea that we have 80 years, but you might not. And it might be on the shorter end of that, and by quite a bit. You might be like 30 years old and something happens and you die. And the reason I want to say that first is because, for the reason I said, a lot of times we don't think about that. We think we've got 80 years, or whatever it is you think you have, 80 to 90 maybe, right? I mean, I feel like those are common decades for people to live to in modern day, but you only have the amount of time you have, and there's no kind of worry, no kind of anything like that, but it is like, well, what am I going to do with it? Because there's so much to choose from, but only so much you can do, because things take time. And good things take time. And so you can do all that you want. And yeah, you can look around and there's so many options and there's so many things to choose from or be a part of or, work for. A lot of people don't really realize that they're not actually wanting money in life. They're just wanting what the money can do for them. And if you spend your whole life getting money so that you can go do something that you've been wanting, a lot of times that thing you're trying to do isn't actually something that takes the amount of money you're working to get, but maybe it took somebody else that much because their approach to it or because just the way they did it. But, because I've been thinking about this, I've had a lot of off-road vehicles, just vehicles that have four-wheel drive and are able to go in the mountains and, through rivers, anywhere in the snow, in the mud, right? Over pretty good sized rocks. And a lot of people think that if you're going to go off-roading, you need like a, you know, high-end off-road vehicle that's really tricked out, and it's got all the aftermarket parts, and it's lifted, and it's got big tires that are bigger than what came on it, and all the things that you could think that an off-road vehicle might have. But you can get an off-road vehicle that's cheaper than maybe your little car that you've been driving even, right? You can probably sell the car you have and buy an off-road vehicle for less money than that and go off-roading. And so the question with what's the reason is, what's the reason you think you need the high-end thing in that case, right? Because I was thinking about this earlier when I was driving today. I was looking at these cars on the road, they're lifted and big tires, and I wouldn't do more in a car like that, personally, than I have done in the cars that I've owned that have just been how they came from the factory, as far as height and size of things, right? Capability level. So I've had so much fun off-road, and I've been able to do it in the cars that I've had. And if I were to have the mindset that I needed to have a vehicle that cost like 3-4 times the amount, even more, right? 5 times the amount of, and that's probably really closer to what it would be for these cars that you think of as like these off-road capable vehicles that you can like just visually see, and it's like, oh yeah, like there's no doubt that thing is made to go off-road, versus some cars that you might not really think are as good, but in many ways at least very close to as good. And so if I thought I had to spend all that money in order to even be able to go off-road, then I never would have really done it at all up until this point, because I'm not interested in spending that much money on a vehicle, because you don't need to unless it's something you really choose to do. Again, right? What's the reason? So a lot of times in life, I don't want to say this in any kind of like self-punishment type of way, like, right? Like, don't get after yourself. But a lot of times we really are truly holding ourselves back from things because we think that it has to look a certain way for it to even be able to happen. And in that case, when we ask the question, what's the reason? It's because that's what we've seen other people do. But that's why I talk about how we don't need to listen to other people. We don't need to do what other people do. We don't need to have a life that's anywhere near somebody else's, because we are individuals and our God has a plan for us. And the big thing is, there's a lot of stuff that we feel like we just can't do unless, and then there's like this big hurdle that we don't know how to quite overcome, but it doesn't need to be overcome because it's something that maybe somebody else has approached it in a way where they went about doing it like that. But there's so many ways to do the same thing. And you can do the same thing so many different ways. I think that's just said the same, but backward each time I said it. But that's really the case. And so I've just been thinking, there's so many businesses, for example, so many sports, so many things like that. I mean, you go somewhere to eat food at a restaurant, and some people just want to try all the restaurants that are around them or even that they could really get to, right? But why? I mean, some people go their entire life maybe having more money than somebody else, but the person with the more money always eats at home and they just make food. Whether their home looks like this or looks like that, meaning it looks more like a shack or looks like a mansion. It's not about resources, but it's about what's the reasoning. And these people might spend just about every single meal that they ever eat at home eating it and making it and preparing it. And they go to the grocery store, the market, the stand, people selling fruit, vegetables, wherever it is. They go to the meat market. They get all their food and they bring it home and make it for just about every meal ever, their whole life. But then this other person, the reason I mention money is because maybe this other person has less money, but thinking that if they had more money, they could go to more restaurants and then their life could be better as far as what they ate. But the person with the more money that always eats at home doesn't even go out, even though they have plenty of money to be able to pay for like restaurant food and somebody else making their food is the whole point, right? Usually it costs a little bit more for somebody else to make you food because now you're paying for not only the food you eat, but somebody else doing the preparation work as well. But the person with the less money, maybe they're just striving and striving and striving to go to all these restaurants and they just think they need more money. But what's the reason? You know? Not only what's the reason you think it needs to be that, but what is it doing? I don't know. I mean, that's something, dude, that, shoot, you saw me or heard me even just get like humbled by that. That hit me. I think a big thing is when I was growing up, we almost never ate at home. And now I probably haven't eaten out, yeah, maybe like more than 3 times in the past 12 months, you know, and in the past few years, it's been like that where I just don't eat out very much. But growing up as a kid, you know, we just never had meals in the house when I was living with my dad. But, you know, occasionally we'd be going out to fast food restaurants or even places to sit down in like a dine-in type of place. But that's, you know, when I say I speak out of personal experience on most all the things I talk about, it's this kind of stuff. That's why I started to talk about this part of it, of my childhood, because it humbled me and it hit me. I'm like, man, you know, because I'm seeing where this is coming from, this whole description that I'm doing and why I approached it the way that I did, because I don't feel like eating out is actually a privilege type of thing. I think it's something that's more of a trap, and it's more of a misunderstood thing about what's really going on. And so that's the whole thing, is what's the reason? You know, and people who like to go, I mentioned sports, there's so many things you can choose from in this life to play as far as a sport. But there's some people that pretty much only play one sport their whole life, but they dedicate like most of their life to that sport in all the ways they do. Maybe it's just them playing and training for it, or maybe they're following other teams, or, you know, researching it in whatever way. But then there's other people who just want to try every sport that's out there, and they feel like they're lacking so much if they haven't tried this other sport. And then there's new sports that come up, like pickleball is a fairly recent sport, and all of a sudden everybody's doing that. But until when? Because what's the reason that things like that really get popular, you know? It's because everybody else is doing it. Because things fluctuate in popularity for those reasons, because maybe now you've got people to do it with, because it's become a popular thing, because of the media. There's a lot of reasons as to why. So the big thing is, though, what's the reason you're doing whatever it is? Because you only have the amount of time you have here, and there's no like limiting thing within that, but what there is a limit on is the amount that you can do within that time, because things take time. You're not going to go play a 45-minute sports game and then just keep doing that forever, because you only have the amount of time you have till you die. But are you going to play the same sport and keep playing 45-minute games of that same sport? Or are you going to jump from sport to sport and play 45 minutes of all these other things as well? And why, right? Just what's the real reason? Because I've thought about like moving so often, me personally as well, but just people in general. A lot of people feel like they need to travel the whole world. They want to see every part of the earth, but why? I'm not saying you can't, and I'm not saying it's a wrong thing, but what's the actual reason? Can you think about that before you do it and come back and then realize maybe you wasted some time there in the ways you did, or maybe the whole thing feels like you could have done without it, right? What's the reason? I mean, just really, no kind of like thing behind that, other than it's a question that has to be asked, or else you'll find yourself with no more time left. And maybe quite a few things that you don't even know why you did. And okay, but if you can ask yourself and get really intentional about what you're doing and why, I mean, I think that's the ideal for everybody. You know, I mean, opinions aside, we only have a certain amount of time. And so I'm thinking about moving though, and all right, so I move, but what's the reason? Because I was thinking about this. I was outside walking earlier, and I'm like, what would actually benefit my life, if anything, if I didn't live where I currently do? And I was like, maybe just about nothing, right? At this time, in the state of life that I'm in, and the stage of life that I'm in, the things that I'm doing right now, maybe they're actually, in this moment, wouldn't really be much of any benefit to moving for me right now, right? But you could. I mean, I could move to anywhere. If it cost a certain amount of money, well, if there's a way that I could get that money, I could, right? If it was clear across the earth and I just didn't know how to navigate all the travel to get there and scheduling things, well, if I could figure out how to do that, then I could, right? But the point is, why? What's the reason? That's the question that kind of has to be asked. Otherwise, you'll just look back and be like, well, what? That just happened and I don't know why, right? Sometimes we make some decisions sometimes and we don't really even know why, but a lot of times we say we're quote unquote going with the flow, but really you're going with the status quo. Really you're going with the conformity. You're just following the crowd that's lost. A lot of times in those cases. And so what's the real reason? Because what's the real reason? People are crowding to things as well, right? We a lot of times just don't ask ourselves, what's the reason? And so, I've thought about a lot of things and how things could potentially be such a hindrance. But why? Is it just a perception because somebody else one time said that in their life they think that it's a hindrance? And so I heard that, and maybe that's just the meaning I assigned to that thing. Because I'm going to get a dog. And growing up, my dad always told me I couldn't get a dog, right? Well, let me be very clear. I remember him saying, when you grow up and get your own job and have your own family and your own house, you can get a dog and do whatever you want, right? But as a kid, I always wanted a dog, and my dad was just like, no, we're not having a dog in this house, right? But then we moved in with the woman he married, and she had 3, and so, okay, right? And we lived there, and the dogs were in the house with us for the amount of time they were until we didn't have them anymore. Which, I mean, it was a decent amount of time. I was thinking about this the other day, and I don't know how long it was, but I think it was at least a year, right? A couple years maybe. So, right? I mean, people just say some stuff sometimes. But that's what I mean is, what's the reason, What's the real reason my dad was so against getting a dog, But I'm not focusing on him other than it was intentional for me to say that within this because it's context. I mean, you can see that in your own life with people who have told you things, but only because they don't think it's something they could do, but then maybe they end up doing it anyway, right? It's just perceptions and beliefs and ideas, in all ends of what I'm discussing within this, because the reasons are things that are individual to us. And so what is it? Because somebody else might not have even batted an eye at it, right? Not even have thought about it for a second, but you might think that it's something you could never do. And so it's all perception, and those things don't even exist. Beliefs, opinions, perceptions, right? We talk about truths because that's what I'm saying is what's the reason, what's underlying all this? And the truth is things are just what they are. And so whose perception are we going by? Because usually it's not our own when we're making decisions. Even if there's nobody else around us in that current time telling us things, it's stuff that we've heard from other people. And so we're going off that from our memories and our imprints within our beliefs about things that aren't our beliefs, but it's somebody else's words or somebody else's opinions that got ingrained into us. And that doesn't only happen as kids. You talk about childhood trauma and childhood beliefs a lot, but it can happen throughout any stage of life if you believe stuff, right? That's why I say we've got to look at stuff as it is. We're human beings. We're never going to do that perfect. By no means do I, but I definitely have that be the intention of what I'm doing. And so, but anyway, when I do get a dog, I've always had this idea about, I just wasn't allowed to, and there's no reason other than whatever I believed about it, right? And so what's the reason that I feel like there's certain parameters about what size of dog I could get, right? Or where I'd have to live for it to be something I could do, how much money I'd have to have, all those kind of things, right? What age I was, how my life looked, and if I had a family or not. All the things that seem like parameters that need to be addressed don't. Because again, there's other people that don't even think about it, and then they get a dog, and then the next 15 years they've had this dog, and it was like, well, I don't know, I just got a dog. Here she is, and it's that simple. But then somebody like me, at least if I were to be acting solely out of the beliefs about what I grew up, thinking about what it meant for me, Evan Strong, to own a dog, it was almost like an impossible thing that could never happen within those beliefs. But in all actuality, in all truth, there's no reason I couldn't. Other than where I currently live, the people who own the place that I live at, they don't want dogs in this house, and that's their choice, right? So that's what I'm saying about what's the reason for everything, anything, all things, whatever we do, right? Even that, what's the reason for people not wanting dogs in their house, right? Because a lot of times it's just an idea. Because you get a poodle and there's no hair. So if your reason was you don't want hair in your house, poodles also don't drool, right? There's a lot of things people maybe, have one reason they don't want something, but that reason can be not even something to worry about because there's options and differences to stuff. And so even cats, there's types of cats that don't shed, as far as I'm aware. If I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure, right? And so if it's about the hair, well, you can get animals that don't have hair, you know? So again, if your reason for not ever going off-roading is because feeling like you didn't have enough money to spend on what you thought you needed within an off-road vehicle, well, you might have 2-3 times the amount of money that you'd need to spend on something that would be very reliable and capable to take you where you would go off-road, and you just don't really realize it as it is, right? So it's stuff like this, dude. We got to see in our lives what's the real reason. And a lot of this comes with purchasing things because a lot of people are spending a lot of money on stuff they don't want and they don't know why, right? A lot of people, not only money, but let's say this as well, at least for, let's at least mention this, and maybe we'll dive into it a little bit, but a lot of people are trying so hard to do things they never wanted to do to impress people they don't like, right? And what's the reason? If you're doing it, you're doing it. Don't get all upset with yourself. That's like a big thing to see within all of these examples. Don't get all self-punishing and be like, "Oh man, yeah, you're right. I've been doing that and I shouldn't have." You might be saying, "Well, don't replace that shouldn't with just don't need to going forth. I mean, at this instant and then forever because we're in one eternal now, right? One eternal round. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled One Eternal Round. But there's no such thing as trying to change what you shouldn't have. It's, oh, I just don't need to, right? So, and that switch in approaching things can really, really, really help you with any kind of like self-punishment type of stuff you do. It's just don't say shouldn'ts, say don't need, as in present tense. And there you go, because that's the truth anyway. There's no such thing as trying to change the past. You never could. It doesn't even exist. If that sounds philosophical and like a belief, well, it's what it is, right? I mean, that's the truth. One eternal round. That's why I referenced that episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, because we're only now, dude. And tomorrow you're only now, but it's just not now's now, it's then's now, right? I mean, that's just the actual truth. So, yeah. But yeah, what's the reason for anything that you're doing ever? Because you're doing it and somebody else isn't. Right? And a lot of people are doing stuff, but you're not. And so why are they doing those things? And don't worry about that. Like, don't worry about other people, but it just meaning, again, for the sake of we do different things. And some people never do something that you spend pretty much every part of your life doing, and vice versa, right? Sometimes you have never done something and somebody else just couldn't imagine life without that thing. It's like they almost associate life with that thing. Like that is their life, right? And so what's the reason? You got so much to do. Well, clarified again, not out of like an obligation of things to get done, but out of choices of things that could be participated in. And so just why though? Because why not, right? A lot of people spend their whole life working toward what they think about as retirement. And some people never have a retirement. Some people don't want to retire. And some people just, spend their entire life working toward what they think is going to be retirement, and then it doesn't happen. And so they didn't even live their life. They lived in a preparatory state of something that didn't even ever occur. And so what's the reason? Because a big thing is, similar to retirement, a lot of people will spend most of their life trying to have the money to afford a house that they think they need. But why? And really why? Like actually ask yourself, what's the reason? Because some other people, they might just be very content living out in the woods in a shack that cost, less than you could even imagine. I don't want to put a number on it, but just something that you didn't even have to really work more than maybe a few months to afford. And that person's content for life in that situation. But then the other person, let's say, not only just like a nice house, but they want the mansion, and they just feel like that's what they need. But it's not. It's not a need. I mean, in your own specific case and through promptings and reasons why you're using it and whatever. But again, what's the reason? That's the only question. You can do whatever you want in this life, but what's the reason? Because you can become the richest man on earth or woman, and great, but what's the reason? If there's a reason to it, do it. But also, you can spend your whole life, as some people do, never making a single amount of currency, any amount of money at all, and they live 80, 90, 100 plus years. So what's the reason? Not that one side has to be good or one side has to be bad or whatever, but just there is a reason to it. Otherwise, there wouldn't be differences. Everything would just be what it is, and we live in a very just, this is the only way society is type of existence as human beings, and that's just not what we do. Because there are so many choices of things to do. But if it doesn't seem like there's a good enough reason for you to do it, you just won't. But if it doesn't seem like there's any reason you wouldn't, then you'll do everything you can too. Whatever the thing is, right? But a lot of times we don't realize that those things are just beliefs. We think that the reason is this and it has to be. But maybe it's just because that's what somebody else told us. That's what somebody else thought. And they were like the most dominant voice around us at X time in our life. And so we just kind of believed it, right? As well as them. It's things like that. So just what's the reason, really? I mean, you think that maybe you're not somebody who's cut out to have children. Well, why? If you can physically have children, like if you're a woman and you can carry children and birth them, then you could, right? And so if you feel like you're just not somebody who could have children, well, why? Is it because somebody blah, blah, blah? Or is it because you think that blah, blah, blah? I don't want to even throw out hypotheticals for you to get in your head about something because I want it to be an authentic, what's the reason? And have the real reason come to your awareness and then see if it's even valid or not, right? Yeah. But I think a big thing to see is a lot of teams, yeah. We'll get into that if I do. I'm not holding back from saying something, but it's just not supposed to be said right there. But I think a big thing is I'm definitely going to get a dog, and it's not some kind of hope. It's not some kind of promise that I'm trying to make or whatever, but I just will. And, since I was a little kid, I always thought it'd be awesome to have a dog. But now what it's having me do is, as I'm getting closer to the time when I'm going to get a dog, well, like I said, prerequisite for me to get a dog is to not dwell within this house, this physical building that I'm currently living in. And that's totally fine because I don't own this place, and so I don't have a say over that. I don't have any kind of dispute against that as if I'm trying to change that by any means. But I'm just saying that's one thing that will have to happen in my specific case. But then other than that, there's no other reason that I couldn't get a dog. And what it's allowing me to really pick apart is, as I said, getting closer to when I'm going to get one of my own. What's the reasoning that for so many years I just thought it was something I couldn't do? And as I'm kind of like picking apart just owning a dog, just one of the things that are many of things we could choose within this life to do or not do, we could think that we can or can't do, or we can think are for or aren't for us, right? Whatever it is on any end, if you start to kind of pick apart one thing, it gets you to start to really see it for as it is, because again, it's just a dog. In all the ways that it is, because we can be so grateful for it for what it is without like thinking it's this massive thing. Like when I had Frank the guitar, the little half-size guitar that I had, I would talk about how I love this thing so much, I'm so grateful for it, but also I'd be entirely content if it just broke in half and I never got to use it again. And I personally broke it in half, and it was today that the garbage truck came where we live, and he took it away. And I'll never see that guitar again unless some random thing happened and I like stumbled across it, right? But it's broken. That's how it is with a dog. It's kind of like that episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled "It's Not About Them," where if it's a wife, a husband, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a dog, something inanimate that we just really care about, whatever it is in our lives that we can cherish so much, great, cherish it. But it's not about that thing, because there's always another one. And that sounds a little bit harsh because it sounds like I'm just saying people are replaceable, and they are. That doesn't mean that you can't love somebody, but then, I mean, a lot of what I talked about within that episode, but right? I mean, people die, and then what? If you end up marrying somebody else, then not that you like replaced that person, but that person's just playing a role in your life of being your significant other, and that's great. But then if they're not even able to physically be there to do it, maybe somebody else can. And right, you see what I mean? It's not some kind of bad type of quote unquote people are replaceable, but it's things are just what they are. And so when I was talking about the dog, it's just a dog. And when I say that, I mean, you can have so much love for that dog, and that dog will probably have so much love for you. That's why they call dogs man's best friend, right? Just mankind's best friend. They're so, especially some dog breeds, are so willing to please their owners, and that's like what they want to do over everything else, really, you know. But at the same time, it's just a dog. Without any kind of like diminishing anything behind that statement is the truth, right? So the point is, we can look at things as such a thing, or it can be just a house. Because you can spend your entire life working toward that mansion that you wanted, and great, you own it and you purchase it or whatever, or you spend the rest of your life making payments on it and never actually even own it. And so that's strange to do, but people do it. And I'm not condemning if that's what you want to do, but it is kind of strange, truly. Undisputed, it's strange, and especially to the people that do it, because you don't own the house and you know how much it costs, right? You're the one making the payments. But the thing with that is, then maybe one day that house just gets burned down intentionally because they're just going to build something else there or whatever, right? And so, sure, it's this awesome mansion, but it's also just a house that is now just ash that was burned, wood, and everything else that it was that's now just, gone. And so things really are just what they are. And so what's the reason that you're doing anything at all, ever, whatsoever? No matter what it is, because we can get into hypothetical after hypothetical. This is one of those things. And that's almost everything we talk about here. That's what it is one of those things that doesn't matter how many hypotheticals we could choose to do. It's always the same outcome because it's truth. See what I mean? When I say we speak on truth, this is what I'm talking about. It applies to everything. That's what I'm talking about, right? What's the reason for anything? Because everything is just what it is, no matter how much you love it or them, truly. Really? 7 billion people out there. What's the reason you chose that human being to spend most all your time with, sleep in the same bed with, make the same life decisions with, right? We're not talking down on anybody by saying that, but that's the truth. They're just a human being. And I know that sounds a little bit harsh, but it's the truth. Because a lot of times people have exes, right? You broke up with somebody that you thought was going to be your everything forever, and now you burn everything you ever had that was affiliated to them, and you want to get rid of it because they're just a person. But sometimes we put more importance on something than we should because our God is our highest importance. Otherwise, we're lost and lacking. Something that we can never lack, but our attention's just not on it, which is our God himself, Jesus Christ. And so that's the whole thing, is what's the reason? Because of all those reasons. And I'm going to wrap it up just like that. Like, that was just uttermost contentment. I'm just so content with wrapping it up. So my name is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. We are what we have discussed within this. We meaning me. I've been the one speaking here, but we will have clothing available, as I said. I'll reiterate one more time. Staying centered, fitting correct, allowing the body to work. Please just try to do all you can to purchase it in the size that is actually yours. Oversized clothing is in itself an imbalance and will damage your body. Has been, if you have been wearing oversized clothing, as I did for so many years. So damaging. So, yeah. thank you. Check out the other 2 sides of the company if you'd like to. Stick around for more episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast if you'd like. And shout out to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the truth of all things. I know that that's a little bit like, oh, he's trying to push a religion, but I'm just trying to share the only place you will ever have the most contentment you can experience as a human being in this life. And that's where it is. Don't believe me, right? I say that so often about all the things I talk about here. And when I don't say it, it's still the intention behind what I'm speaking. Just don't believe me. But take the truth within whatever I ever talk about in my own personal life or behind the podcast or any other 2 sides of our company, whatever it is, right? Just me, Evan Strong, out of just me genuinely one human being speaking this. Please don't believe me. Just take the truth within what I say if there is any, right? Because I could be just saying whatever and who cares? And so don't care. But just truth is truth, okay? So thank you. Yeah, just like that.